The Strait of Malacca, located in Southeast Asia, is one of the busiest shipping lanes on Earth. Every day, hundreds of vessels pass through its narrow waters, carrying fuel, food, and raw materials between Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. As a major route connecting the world's largest economies, any serious incident in these waters could quickly become dangerous. But in mid-1947, multiple ships in the strait reportedly received a message from a Dutch merchant vessel calling itself Ourang Medan. After sending an SOS, the message ended with two final words: "I die." No explanation followed, and the signal then went silent. This is the story of Ourang Medan, the ghost ship from the past. According to later reports, around June 1947, multiple ships in the Strait of Malacca received a distress signal that did not fit the usual pattern. It was sent in Morse code from a vessel identifying itself as the Dutch merchant ship Ourang Medan. SOS from Ourang Medan. We float. All officers, including the captain, dead in chart room and on the bridge. Probably whole crew dead. After a few more incoherent dots and dashes, two final words were reportedly sent: "I die." No further communications were received, and the signal then went silent. Among the ships said to have received the message were two vessels, the City of Baltimore and the Silver Star. The Silver Star was described as the closest and began searching the surrounding waters. Eventually, the crew located a freighter drifting aimlessly on the surface of the sea. The ship was not moving, with no smoke rising from its stacks, and no one appearing on deck. Attempts to make contact received no response. After receiving no reply, members of the Silver Star's crew boarded the Ourang Medan. As they moved across the deck, they discovered bodies scattered throughout the vessel, including the carcass of a dog. The dead lay on their backs, faces turned upward, mouths open, eyes staring. Many were found with their arms raised or outstretched in rigid positions. There were no visible signs of violence, no blood, no damage suggesting a struggle or an attack. Aside from the presence of the dead, the ship itself appeared largely intact and undisturbed. The boarding party searched the vessel, but found no survivors. Leaving the ship adrift was not considered safe, as it posed a hazard to other vessels. And there was still a possibility that authorities could later determine what had happened. A decision was made to tow the freighter back to the nearest port. Not long after the towing began, smoke was seen rising from one of the ship's cargo holds. The Silver Star's crew immediately evacuated the Ourang Medan and cut the tow lines. Moments later, the freighter exploded. The blast tore through the ship, lifting sections of the hull before they collapsed back into the water. Fire spread rapidly, and within minutes, the Ourang Medan began to sink. With the ship's destruction, any physical evidence that might have explained the incident was lost. No cargo could be examined. No instruments could be checked. From that point forward, the story existed only through reports and recollections. Over the years, countless explanations have been proposed for what allegedly happened aboard the Ourang Medan. These range from chemical accidents and secret weapons to mechanical failures and even the supernatural. At first glance, the story appears flexible enough to support almost any theory. But once the details are examined closely, most explanations begin to fail. The most commonly cited explanation is chemical smuggling. This theory was popularized by a German author named Otto Milka, who suggested the ship was carrying a poorly secured cargo of sulfuric acid, potassium cyanide, or other industrial chemicals. Seawater entering the hold may have triggered a reaction, releasing toxic gas that spread throughout the vessel. In theory, such fumes could kill a crew without leaving visible injuries, and an explosion caused by unstable cargo could explain the ship's destruction. However, this explanation quickly runs into practical problems. Sulfuric acid fumes are highly irritating, causing severe burning sensations in the eyes, and are easily detectable. Crew members would likely have noticed the smell long before it became fatal. More importantly, sulfuric acid exposure does not cause instantaneous death. Victims are typically incapacitated over time, not frozen in place within minutes. The idea that an entire crew would collapse simultaneously, without attempting to escape or send a clear distress signal, does not align with how these chemicals behave in real-world conditions. Some authors have proposed more lethal substances, such as potassium cyanide or even leftover chemical weapons from World War II. In the chaotic years following Japan's surrender, hazardous materials were seized, relocated, and disposed of under rushed and often poorly documented circumstances. In that context, the theory can appear plausible. Post-war conditions were disordered, and governments have historically been willing to bypass formal procedures when strategic interests were at stake. The absence of surviving records by itself does not automatically make such an operation impossible. But this explanation also fails under scrutiny. Toxic gases capable of killing an entire crew would not simply vanish under shipboard conditions. If the lower decks had been filled with lethal fumes moments earlier, the boarding party from the Silver Star should have also been contaminated. Yet no reports describe illness, injury, or medical treatment among the Silver Star crew. If the Silver Star rescuers experienced no contamination, then the timing would need to be impossibly precise. The gas would have to clear completely, the ship remain stable just long enough to be boarded, and then explode. Another explanation avoids chemicals altogether. Author Vincent Gaddis suggested that a mechanical failure, such as a smoldering fire or boiler malfunction, could have released carbon monoxide throughout the ship. Carbon monoxide is odorless, invisible, and deadly in confined spaces. Under the right conditions, a crew could lose consciousness without warning. A fire spreading unnoticed below deck could later trigger an explosion. Yet this explanation also falls short. Carbon monoxide poisoning does not produce the dramatic physical postures described in later accounts, nor does it explain a detailed distress message reporting dead officers and crew rather than smoke, fire, or mechanical failure. Once again, the explanation does not match the specifics of the story. With every major explanation exhausted, attention shifts away from what supposedly happened aboard the ship and toward whether the story itself can be trusted. Beyond individual contradictions, a larger pattern emerges. The Ourang Medan does not remain fixed in one place or time. Instead, the story changes location at least 3 times as it is retold. The earliest version of the story appeared in October 1940 in the Italian newspaper Il Piccolo as part of a maritime column written by Silvio Scherli. This version places the incident south of the Solomon Islands and describes a shorter, less detailed distress call. In subsequent retellings, the location shifts west to the Strait of Malacca. While it added new details, it also introduced changes to the location, the year, the reported cargo, and the wording of the distress message. In later post-war retellings, the story moves again, this time thousands of kilometers east to the Marshall Islands. This version was published by the Dutch-Indonesian newspaper De Locomotief. It is in this version that the survivor narrative appears. According to these accounts, a single German crew member escaped the Ourang Medan ship, swam to Taongi Atoll, told his story to a missionary and natives there, and died shortly afterward. These accounts claim that the missionary later told the story to the same person, Silvio Scherli. This creates a source contradiction. Some versions attribute the story to a lone survivor, while others attribute it to the rescuers from the Silver Star. Even if these were separate sources, the accounts were never clearly distinguished. The story does not explain which details come from whom, and the same dramatic elements appear across both versions without clear confirmation. The geography further undermines the account. The ship was allegedly located hundreds of nautical miles from land. even under ideal conditions. This would require a swim far longer than the longest verified unassisted swim in human history. Taongi Atoll itself is uninhabited, making the presence of a missionary there highly unlikely. The survivor narrative fails under basic mathematics and geography. Even the alleged rescue vessel introduces further inconsistencies. The ship most often named, the Silver Star, did exist. However, by 1948, it had already been renamed Santa Cecilia and repositioned to operate in Brazil and South America. The continued use of an outdated ship name suggests later retellings relied on recycled maritime details rather than first-hand testimony. Despite these changing locations and narratives, whether involving a survivor or alleged rescuers, every version ultimately leads back to the same source. All major versions of the story trace back to newspaper reports, and more specifically, to a single individual, Silvio Schierli of Trieste, Italy. He was a maritime radio operator and freelance journalist who appears in the earliest reports and again in post-war articles, presenting the incident as new each time. Even the Dutch-Indonesian newspaper De Locomotief ultimately acknowledged that it could not independently verify the account and was relying solely on Schierli's assurances. This raises a basic question of authenticity. How could the same individual report the same incident, yet present different locations, dates, and narratives across multiple publications? Supporters of the legend often argue that the absence of official records points to a cover-up, but secrecy does not erase all traces. Hidden operations still require ships, crews, fuel, ports, and logistics. They leave secondary documentation and institutional residue. In the case of the Ourang Medan, there are no shipyard records, no insurance files, no port logs, no naval responses, and no first-hand accounts from the alleged rescuers. If something did happen at sea, there is no evidence it happened in the way this story describes. And if the story was fabricated, it was not created as a single lie, but grew over time as details were added, repeated, and exaggerated. In the end, the Ourang Medan remains a maritime legend.